My name is Ben Hammond. I'm the program leader of your secondary PGC. Welcome to your first ever Teachers as Professionals video. These were released, I think, a couple of days before the course began last year. And some of our student teacher feedback from last year was that wouldn't it be a great idea if you could share these much earlier so that student teachers who may have a bit of time over the summer can engage with the content and kind of get their head around some of the fundamentals of teaching and learning and your responsibilities as teachers before the course starts, rather than having an avalanche of stuff hit you right at the beginning of the course. So that's what this is. It's a series of 7 videos at the beginning of the autumn term, a couple at the beginning of the spring term, and a couple more at the beginning of the summer term. And each will be associated with a little quiz. That quiz will arrive at the beginning of the course come September the 12th. So until then, it's great to have you with me, and we kick ourselves off with thinking about one of our key themes and our key concepts really on the PGC, and that is student teacher well-being. So this is essentially my thinking about how to steer the course. I did this course myself, must have been 16, 17 years ago now. And I'm going to combine my own thinking and my own kind of 6 concrete steps you can take to help support your well-being through the year and help cope with the workload that's coming your way. But also we're going to do a deep dive into thinking about the C's that make teaching quite challenging. So we're going to think about context. We're going to think about causality, and we're going to think about another C that I can't quite remember. But anyway, we'll come on to it. Let's get started. First of all, it's context. Now, this, in a sense, is going to be quite hard hitting because, look, we know, and you by now you're coming into the teaching profession, you'll know it's a challenging profession, but I'm going to map out just the extent of that because it's quite significant, the extent of the number of teachers, for example, that think that that teaching is challenging, and we're going to unpick the reasons why, but we're not going to shy away from thinking about that right at the beginning. Okay, so it's a bit of a kind of heads up. But also, I want you to remember that this is data that's taken from all teachers, usually out across England and potentially across the UK. And for a start, they haven't all trained here at the Institute, and they're not all, in a sense, of the certainly in their training year of the caliber of student teacher that is watching this video right now. So there's a couple of things in your favor right from the off. But anyway, a lot of teachers, okay, and we've just had the NASUWT, that's one of the 2 major teaching unions, come out with their teaching survey, teacher well-being survey, and many teachers say that their job has had at some point an impact on their well-being. And 71%, this is from a few years ago now, but 71% of education professionals describe themselves as stressed. Now, that's not all the time, but that they have jobs that you could characterize as stressful. And hold on, let me move myself out of the way. There we go. We know that there is a bit of a crisis in teacher retention, certainly over the last 5 to 10 years. And every year in London, 12%, so it's over 10% of the teaching workforce leave each year. Now, some proportion come back later on, but certainly over 10% leave each year. And a lot of those teachers are citing workload as one of the reasons for, or the main reason for considering leaving the profession. Now, the same NASUWT survey said that just over 50% say workload has impacted on their mental health in the last 12 months. And in the NASUWT's previous survey, over 2/3 said they actually wouldn't recommend it as a career, which is really interesting to see. Now, we know that there are higher numbers of EBAC subject teachers leaving, and the EBAC is subjects including maths, English, science, humanities, and a modern foreign language. And you could argue that those subjects are, under the cosh of the most significant accountability and monitoring in schools because of their status in schools, for example. But, and let's take a deep breath here, okay? The data is actually contradictory on this because we also know from the OECD's TALIS survey, the most recent edition of which said that actually over 3/4 of teachers in England are happy in their job and are satisfied with their job. So something's going on here where teachers are coping with a lot of stress, they're being impacted in terms of their mental health, but at the same time they're getting an immense amount of job satisfaction back from that very same job that is also potentially pushing some of them away from the profession. So what could be happening here? Well, let's look at some causality. So the OECD in their survey 2 years before that found that 90% of teachers say teaching gives them the opportunity to contribute to children's development and society. And obviously, your reasons for coming into the profession may, there's myriad reasons for coming in, but it may revolve around the impact that you make, both to individual children, individual young people, but also society itself, and attempting to make the world a better place. Teaching is one of the most honest and straightforward professions to make an impact on society. It's also amazing in that it's real, it's alive, it's interactive, it is fast. You never know what exactly is going to happen in a given day because you are engaging and dealing with and responding to and motivating and inspiring autonomous young people. And so that sense of it being open-ended and it being a positive challenge in that sense is something that you don't get in so many other professions. So these are real drivers into the profession. At the same time, we know that there are all kinds of reasons: political changes, accountability demands, schools interpreting guidance from government in a particular way that says, oh, right, we've got to do this now, we've got to change that, we've got to do this, bringing more workload onto teachers, for example. That, yeah, those workload demands and pressures, are really driving people away. And here's a kind of often seen quote that teachers are given a lot to do, but they have to make do in that with such little, and that might be few resources from the provided by the state, little in terms of finance and what have you. So there's some of the push and pull factors that are potentially driving teachers to maybe want to leave the profession. Others want to come into the profession. Now, the consequences are that we get a proportion of the teaching workforce responding in 3 different ways. Okay, and as it said it's about 10% of the London workforce each year. So you get retreatism, leaving the profession; downshifting, saying, a career that may have been going upwards and upwards fairly rapidly, as you take on more responsibility and senior leaders within a given school see that you are really capable. Actually, it turns, it's that career turning into reverse gear, reducing load, responsibility, or teaching status within a given school. Or it might be about rerouting, so changing school or changing educational context, taking those educational and teaching and learning skills that you've built up and experiences that you've built up and applying that to a different educational context. So that, those 3 could be responses to this problem we're facing with workload and impacts on well-being. That's some research done by Troman and Woods in 2000. All the references are at the end of today. But I want to remind you all that teachers have agency in this. You're not sort of passive recipients of others' stresses and pressures. And the NEU's workload and wellbeing survey, I think, attest to this in some way, because it's certainly true that not all teachers find it too much, and many are coping and managing the workload demands of the role. So this indicates that you do have agency within this. So um, with the pandemic, they did some research and asked teachers about the impact of the pandemic with the circumstances of the pandemic. And schools and teachers have been through so much over the last 2-3 years. They're veritable heroes that don't really get recognised as much as perhaps they should. But 70% responding to this survey have actually said, "Yeah, well, I can cope. It's manageable. The workload through the pandemic has been manageable." Um, so that's almost three quarters. Now, some are only just managing, but they're managing. And then without the pandemic, so coming out of that pandemic, that rises to 82%. That's 4 out of every 5 teachers are managing with workload. Some only just, but they're managing. And that tells me that they have agency and the ability to respond proactively to these workload demands. And in a sense, there's two things I want us to think about. One is how we support you be able to manage these workload demands and these potential impacts on your well-being, but also how you can help yourself. So I'm going to talk about two things. First, how we support you and just give you some examples of how we support you through the year. And secondly, then get you thinking. I think I talked about 5 or 6 concrete steps that you can take to equip yourself, to prepare yourself for the year ahead, and just kind of rules of thumb to live by through your PGC year. So embedded into our PGC design, into how our course works, we absolutely give you a graduated introduction to teaching. So you build up to a 50% teaching timetable of 9 to 11 hours. That gives you the time and space to think deeply about how teaching and learning happens and how it should best happen in any given circumstance. So we don't overload you from the beginning like other programs might. The first placement, so School Experience 1, that's what SE1 stands for, is mostly 4 days a week. And that gives you a 5th day at the Institute to, I love alliteration, reflect, recalibrate, renew on that 5th day, and refocus, ready to go back in the following week. With the Institute at UCL, you have a huge cohort network, so a subject-specific cohort network that is a huge source of support to you, unlike many other institutions who are much smaller in nature. The way that we've constructed you kind of compiling the evidence that shows that you can do a good job of teaching isn't like many other providers. We basically believe and we place credence on the feedback that you get from those that are observing you and those that are working you day in, day out on your 2 school experience placements. And so it's reports from them, it's formal observations from them, it's mentor meeting notes and discussions and what have you. It's your tutor visits and discussions with your tutor that we put into our assessment and development portfolio, rather than every single time you write home or every single lesson you plan or every single evaluation. It all has to go in. No, it doesn't. It's just those kind of significant pieces of evidence based on either your reflections, because we get you to reflect formally a few times through the year, or more commonly, the feedback of others who are already teachers. Absolutely, we prioritize your well-being and workload and your ability to discuss that, because it's a professional act, not to just suppress it, but to discuss it in a professional working environment. So there's a little bit in our mentor meeting minutes form and template that asks you to talk about that, just to check in with your mentor at school every week. And finally, we organise things around your subject specialist tutor, who's institute based at UCL, who is always there as a first port of call for help. And they can open the doors to a huge range of other support. Secondly, I want to give you some really concrete examples of the bits of the program, in a sense. Let me put me in the middle. Sorry. Um, uh, yeah, I want to talk to you about the bits, in a sense, of the course that I have most direct impact on, and just how these change year on year, based, to really support students' well-being. So, some examples for the coming year. Um, well, we're at last moving to face for our biggest program, which is Institute Professional Studies. That's our kind of flagship program, and in the afternoons, you're going to be face to face for that with that, mostly in what we call the Logan Hall, which is our big space on level one of the IOE, and you're going to be able to travel in off peak, because it can be mega stressful traveling in at peak times. So we've made that travel off peak. It's only 10 times through the year, but it's a change based on your well-being. Um, the evaluations that I asked people to complete year on year, and after each of our themed IPS days, um, uh, are voluntary for this year. So those that want to contribute and help develop the course by giving me a little bit of feedback about how a particular theme day went can do so, but those that don't have the time don't have to. So you're empowered in a sense to make that choice yourself. We've removed whole parts of the ADP, that assessment development portfolio, based around IPS, based on feedback from last year. Um, I've dramatically streamlined and cut down the IPS guide that kind of tells you what this program called Institute Professional Studies is. It's now between 2 and 4 pages long, and it was 10 times that last year. So hopefully that kind of thing helps. These videos, for example, are available over a much longer period, right from the beginning of the course, way before the beginning of the course, 6 weeks before. That ADP that I mentioned before, the assessment development portfolio, has been shortened for the coming year, and we've put in a few innovations, like a single at-a-glance overview of what you've got to do and when, like really straightforward, one page. You can put it on your wall, and see what you need to be doing and when, which is kind of a really helpful innovation. And we're using kind of shorter exemplars from previous students. We used quite lengthy ones last year, so everyone thought we've got to write or we've got to do things of the similar length. But that's not the case, so we're streamlining those as well. So that's some examples of how we support you, but let's think about how, in a sense, you can support yourself. So, concrete steps. Here we go. Da, 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 da. Let me just do a quick time check. Okay. Sorry, I just did a quick time check. So, banish perfectionism is the first thing that I recommend that you try to imbibe within yourself through the year. It's never going to be the case that you've got enough time to make every PowerPoint beautiful and wonderful and a thing of artistic beauty, or total clarity for your students. Good is good enough. Move on, concentrate on the things that really add value, the maximum value to the impact of your teaching, knowing with crystal clear clarity how you're going to communicate something that's actually pretty complicated, or planning exactly how you're going to engage students, a really tough class, in an idea that you're going to be teaching or a concept that you're going to be teaching. Put time into those things, not into the extraneous things that might be nice, but good is good enough. Absolutely, wearing that mindset that you'll get there and you're in it to learn, and actually you're gonna get a few things wrong along the way, and things don't need to be perfect now, but they'll get better over the year. Yeah, you'll kind of, you don't need to be there now. You're here on the course to become a teacher, not to be a teacher from moment one. I think that's really important. Um, the power of three. I can't even remember what the power of three is. So I'll come back to that. I'll try and have a think. My goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Focus. So you'll feel a bit like a goldfish in a goldfish bowl this year, as lots of people observe what you're doing and what have you. And absolutely, it is it is right to actually take a breath sometimes, and instead of being given feedback on how to improve continually, just have a think about the things that went well in a given lesson, the things that actually you can do this week that you couldn't do last week, or the thing that went well in that class, or with that student who you found difficult the week before, that 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 now have improved. So really shine a light, highlight the good times just as much as thinking about what's next, um, and absolutely try to banish that yes, banish perfectionism, but also perfectionism, can lead to things like procrastination. Yeah. So start now, start whatever it is, that lesson plan, that series of lessons, that thinking about whatever it might be, start now. Use travel time effectively if you can. Scribble down some ideas, get the thinking, the hard bit done, and then everything else flows and is a little bit easier. Power of three. I'm still thinking what that could be. I'm so sorry. Right, concrete step two. Oh, be open to learning. You're going to be um, exposed to so many developmental opportunities this year, and so much of it comes in the form of feedback. And please go in with the mindset that feedback isn't an attack. It's not a personal affront to you. It is just there to help you learn how to be a great teacher. Okay, you're going to get it from everyone, and it's okay. Um, Absolutely use your tutor groups, your cohort, to support you and give you ideas, um, because they will be a source of, there might be 20 or more, 20, 50, 60 in your cohort, and that's far more ideas than any single tutor or single subject leader can ever give you. So use them wisely, use them well. I've talked about being a goldfish. Seek and thee shall find. So absolutely go out there and ask. Ask for solutions to things. Ask other teachers about what's worked for them in the past in a similar situation, and try things out. I often talk about the PGC being like a smorgasbord. Yeah. A huge, great buffet of ideas and options and different activities and pedagogies of ways of teaching and learning that it's our job to expose you to and introduce you to and model for you. But it's your job to try and test these out in your school placements so that you're confident in where you want to go as a teacher. And also, you match up what works not only for you, but more importantly, for the students and the pupils that you teach, and maximizes their learning, and what have you. So, absolutely make it about learning. So, if things aren't, if for a given class, if things aren't going that, brilliantly well, think, okay, so I've got a problem with this class. I've got a problem with this group of students in a class or whatever. What I'm going to do is put my all into this lesson, into this class, and I'm going to learn as much as I can about trying to engage them and trying to turn things around before I leave this placement. And I'm going to learn, I'm going to try things out, and I'm going to learn, and hopefully I'll get through to them. Hopefully, I'll get them all learning. But I myself, by doing that, by changing my position and thinking it's all about what I put into it, not just what they get out of it, okay, that is really key here. So it's what you're putting in and what you're taking out just as much as what other pupils are. Concrete step three. There is never enough time. It's so true. So manage your time well. I remember during my PGC at the beginning, I'd kind of saunter around during my free periods and what have you. Yeah. So they are your friend-free periods. Use them effectively and use them well. Believe me, when you're struggling at the beginning, thinking, a lesson plan takes maybe 4 hours, it won't by the end of your PGC. It'll take certainly under an hour, and you'll be able to plan lessons within free periods. Um, and that comes from practice, by the way, from really honing your skill of practicing how to plan lessons over and over again in different contexts and what have you. Absolutely know when you work best and work then. I work way better in the mornings than I do in the evening. I'm completely frazzled. And if necessary, once I get home from school, I would have a quick power nap and then feel like I would feel in the morning again, kind of ready to go again, just a little bit more prep and what have you, or a little bit of lesson planning. But give yourself that time and space. Don't think you've got to plow through. It may be that you're far better working in the evening, and that's fine. And then you wake up a little later and then go straight into school. Whatever works for you, but know yourself. Okay. Um, yeah, absolutely embrace the things you love. So, downtime is fine, but pepper your year with, outside of teaching, some things that you love to do, and don't just see your world reduced just to teaching, because you need outlets, you need things that you're going to love and that are going to recenter you, and don't let your outlet just be time wasting or what have you. So value that time to recharge, absolutely. Concrete step 4, do not trust your brain. And what I mean by that is, there's so many tasks. You've got to think, you've got 9 to 11 lessons, and you've got maybe 30 students in each lesson, and you've got all kinds of tasks associated with preparing for every lesson there. You've got a lot to remember to do. You've got a lot to juggle. You're constantly juggling a million things. And I don't believe anyone who doesn't have a system for organizing all the things they've got to do and just lets their head take over and do it. I just have never been able to function like that, and I don't believe you. Okay, you're yet to prove me, but I don't believe you if you think you're one of them. So have a system for everything. You're going to have so much coming at you. Have a system for everything that comes at you. Um, Generally, you need to be able to capture tasks very, very fast. Okay, filter them, work out actually what you've got to do, or what can be passed to others and what have you. Prioritize. Okay, what's urgent, what's important, schedule those that take longer and what have you, and then give yourself time to complete those tasks. Now, I use something called Trello, which is both an app, and a website, so that I can very, very quickly put a task that just come to my head, and I can quickly put it in the right category and what have you. I think my phone's telling me I've got to do a task now. So go and have a look at that. But there's a million different apps and what have you available there. But essentially, capturing is the first step, and then it's about working out, what's most important here, etc. Oh, and of course, yeah, review. By capturing, by the way, I used to really suffer before I started doing that whole capturing process. My brain would just be going round and round with all the things I had to do. Whereas actually, if you've captured everything and you're confident that you've actually got everything, and then you can come and review that at a time of your choosing, you can walk away happy in knowing you don't have to just think through all the things you've got to do, because it's captured. So try it out. Step 5, ask before you say yes. And what I mean by this is that, if you're worth, and you're an institute student teacher, you're going to be good at teaching. It's why we've seen that potential in you and invited you onto the course. But you're going to get a lot of opportunities coming your way. But just stop and have a think before you immediately say yes to things, is my recommendation to you. Absolutely. Often, when you're there in school, you get a lot of opportunities, maybe outside of the classroom, or kind of in enrichment activities and things. But the key thing, right when you're starting off, is to prioritize your classes. Okay, they're the things that, and your relationships with those classes and those students there, and getting them into a position where they're effectively learning week on week, lesson by lesson, is your absolute priority from the beginning. Um, give yourself some thinking time. If somebody offers you an opportunity, be clear about exactly what it means. What are the demands that are going to be asked of you? How much time, etc. Um, if you're not sure, ask the advice of others. Absolutely. So just give yourself some breathing space before you say yes. That's a professional way of doing things, which is all that is addressed by my second video, by the way, called Professional Expectations. That's about acting professionally and what have you as you enter the teaching profession. Finally, well, I've sort of talked about this, but have a life outside teaching. So I absolutely believe that if you can have a day off, I always recommend that day is a Saturday, because tasks expand to fit the time allocated to them. If you start working on some lessons and what have you on a Saturday, you won't be that efficient, because you've always got the Sunday. Have the day off, book something that you're going to do with friends, with family, what have you, on the Saturday. It means you've got to do things on the Sunday, and you'll work so much more efficiently. Try it. Absolutely do what you really love. have outlets, etc. There we go. There are my sort of 6 concrete steps and that context that is a bit scary, okay, but it is absolutely surmountable. Remember, without the pandemic, 80% in the NEU survey said that they can manage that workload. And we want you to use your agency to be part of that 80%, not the kind of 20%, the 10% that finds themselves drifting away from the profession because they see it as insurmountable. So you've got agency in this, and we're right behind you all the way to support you on your adventure and your learning journey into the world of teaching. That's the end of the first video. Let me stop that now. And thank you very much for listening in.